I came from a very quiet and reserved family. And all I can remember being told over and over again is, don't say that. What will people think? Don't do that. What will people think? And as I got older, I realized that I just came from a generation of people who worried a lot about what other people think. I wasn't doing anything bad or wrong. It's just that I kept embarrassing my parents because, according to them, it's what would other people think. I used to pretty much say what I thought. And maybe some of you did too. Maybe some of you had the same experiences I did. I mean, did any of you ever say when you were a little kid something like, why are you wearing that thing in your ear? Or, why are you so old? See, that's not bad or wrong. That's just honest curiosity, right? I think we all have honest curiosity. But of course, it horrifies our parents. And I got to where I would kind of hesitate before I would ask questions. And trust that my honest thoughts were okay. Because I even started thinking about what would other people think about me. Do you know what I mean? What would other people think? So then it was like, oh, if I say that or do that, what will other people think of me? And sometimes I didn't much worry about it, but I would go ahead maybe and say what I thought. And then I would worry about it later. What did they think less of me? Was that something they disapproved of? So is there anybody in here, I can't see for the bright lights, is there anybody in here who might have experienced that along the way in your life? Oh good, I'm not alone. Well, Don Miguel Ruiz says in his book, The Four Agreements, which is being taught right now on Tuesday nights by our ministers, he calls that the outside dream. He says society uses mom and dad, the schools, and religion to teach us how to think the way they think. Through the repetition of telling us over and over what to think, we learned everything we know. He says we learn such things as how to behave in society, what to believe and what not to believe, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, what is good and what is bad, what is beautiful, what is ugly, what is right and what is wrong. All of those things were actually predetermined for us before we were born. And they were passed on to us based on what the grown-ups around us believed and what they were taught. We didn't choose our moral religion, our moral values and our religions. They were already there for us before we were born. So as children, we agreed to the information passed on to us from other humans, because as children, don't we believe everything adults say? You know, things like colloquial things. If you were from the South, you learned to eat different things, and you learn differently than someone, say, from the East or the North. They learn different things than you. Our values were different based on the religions and the social mores of the area in which we lived. And other folks had their ideas about what is right or wrong based on how they were raised. So you see, what we did growing up is we just inherited other people's thinking. And we had fear as children, because we depend on these adults, that we would be punished or rejected or abandoned if we didn't do and think what we were told. So, how many of you like rejection? I don't know that I've ever met anyone who likes rejection. So, as you see, growing up, we make sure that we do things that will bring us approval and that won't get us rejected by those that we care about. The problem with all of that is we sacrifice our inner peace to do these things. Of course, some of our parents and our grown-ups and our teachers and our ministers had good ideas and positive ideas, and some were just what they'd been taught. I know that as I was writing this, I had to honor my growing up and say that many good things were taught me by my family, my church, and my schools, but I also learned that some things that were taught were not in line with my own thinking. When we were young, we may have rebelled. I know I rebelled a lot. And I got punished quite a bit. We weren't really strong enough to win when we rebelled, so we finally eventually surrendered. Many times I had to agree with them, but I disagreed with them silently. And many times growing up, I asked questions because inside of me, it wasn't my truth, and I wanted to understand. I'll give you an example of that. When I was 14, I chose to leave my church because I didn't believe what I was being taught there, and I also wasn't allowed to question anything there. And I remember several times not having, I actually was taken to my mother during the Sunday school because I had asked a question that challenged the teacher and she didn't like it. So anyway, when I was 14, I left that church. My mom never forgave me. She didn't want me to leave the church. And really and truly, I think that was a little bit of a thing between us for the rest of our lives. But sometimes we have to honor the truth of who we really are. And as adults, we have to learn to honor our own inner thoughts. And by the way, we have to allow others to honor their own inner thoughts, don't we? We grow up knowing that we must tell our own truth, but at the same time, we must allow others who we know and work with and live with to be able to tell their own truth as well. And sometimes in relationships, even when we do listen to our own inner voice, we don't follow it. How many of you had a lot of red flags in a relationship and you didn't listen to one of them, or you didn't speak up? This can lead to a lot of unhappy times. It can lead to depression and illness. We can have all kinds of problems when we don't listen to that truth that's in us and we think we're still trying to honor someone else or please someone else to keep the peace. Just because it's how we survived as children and becomes a habit as adults, we have to let it go. If we don't, we lose ourselves. Just because we lost our truth long ago or lost the ability to speak our truth long ago, we have to learn as adults to listen to that still small voice within and honor and trust our own truth. Now, it takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of practice, and it takes a lot of self-love, but we all have to do it. Gloria Steinem says, she's the social activist, she said the first problem for all of us, both men and women, is not to learn, but to unlearn. Yeah, I love that quote. We have to unlearn some of the things we were taught as children, some of the prejudices, some of some of the ways that we didn't honor ourselves and didn't honor our truth. We have to unlearn those and learn how to be ourselves fearlessly and full out. The story of Anita Moorjani. How many of you have read Anita's book? Anita Moorjani's book, Dying to Be Me. If you haven't read it, this is a perfect book to teach you why and how it's so important to speak your own truth and live from your own truth. She says this in her book. She was raised by loving, educated parents who were well-traveled and only wanted the best for their daughter. At the same time, they exposed her to 3 very different religions and 3 very different ways of believing. As a child, she wanted to believe all 3 of these philosophies, but they were so different, and she was confused. She didn't know what to believe. Being from India, she was told a husband would be chosen for her by her family. Everything inside of her screamed no. But she followed the rules so as not to go against her family. And as a child, her nanny was Chinese and taught her that philosophy, the philosophy of the Buddha. However, at the same time, she was going to a Catholic school where she was taught a very different religious philosophy. And she was also learning the Hindu religion of her parents. Now, as a result of all this confusion and trying to please her parents, she got a divorce from the husband that was chosen for her, that she was forced to marry. And later on, she remarried and married the man of her dreams, who she still lives with today. But that cost her a lot. She was no longer accepted by her parents, especially her dad. She struggled with her belief systems and trying to release her parents and society from their disapproval of her, and tried her best to please them within the context of still trying to find her own way. And in the midst of this turmoil, she was diagnosed with cancer. She says in the book, Dying to Be Me, written about her near-death experience, she said, "I honestly believe that the most important lesson I learned from my near-death experience is to be fearlessly me. And I truly believe if I had always known this, I would not have gotten cancer." That's a powerful, important statement. She goes on to say, "Love yourself unconditionally and be yourself fearlessly. Do not give away your power." A quote from Amelia Earhart says this as well: "Courage is the price that life demands for granting peace." Don't you like that? Courage is the price that life demands for granting peace. Now, my segment of society was probably a lot different from yours. And so what I learned may have been very different from what a lot of you have learned. As I was saying earlier, that can wreak havoc in marriages and in relationships and in partnerships, because we grow up expecting everyone else to think and act the way we do. And what do we do if they don't? We walk away most of the time. But we're not obligated to think what others want us to think or tell us we should think. We're not obligated as adults to let other people tell us how to feel. We have a wonderful inner guide that teaches us right from wrong if we will just listen. But remember, so does our partner. When we want that right granted to us, we have to also grant that right to others. In a relationship, we must have the courage to tell our truth, and at the same time, we have the courage to let our partners share their truths. They deserve the same rights as we do. How do we find the courage to be who we truly are and who we're truly meant to be, regardless of what anyone else tells us? How do we find that courage? It can be scary. Have you ever noticed sometimes you open your mouth to speak your truth and then you hold back? So at that point, we have to ask ourselves, what is our fear? What is holding us back? What fear is holding us back? Well, some of the fears are rejection. We're worried that people won't like us or approve of us. We fear loss. They will leave me or I'll end up alone. Judgment. They will say I'm different. Failure. I've even had people come to me to help work through this. They're afraid if they speak out, they'll lose their job. And if they're in a relationship, sometimes they won't speak out just because they want to keep the peace. However, none of these fears are really true. They really aren't. If we learn how to do it the right way, and it's worth learning to do the right way because we gain more than we would ever lose by being authentic. Eleanor Roosevelt once said, "I gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience which I must stop and stare in the face." Yeah, we have to stop and stare it in the face. We have to notice when we're not honoring our truth in ourselves. We have to notice how that takes away our energy. We have to notice how we feel less than or frustrated, or, as I said earlier, it can even cause problems like illness. When we become true to ourselves, we become instruments of truth for the whole planet. This was another part of what Anita Morjani said she learned when she was on the other side during her near-death experience. That we become true to ourselves when we become instruments of truth for the whole planet. It's worth that, isn't it? Becoming true to ourselves. And I know something else, and you probably agree with this too. Aren't we drawn to strength and courage? Don't we want to be with people who are strong and courageous and truthful and authentic? We all do. There was a story of a big celebration on a cruise ship, a big party, and the honoree was an old man. Earlier in the day, a young woman had fallen over the side of the ship, and as people watched in horror, the old man plunged into the murky waters right beside her. The crowd asked him to get up on stage that night at the party that was thrown just for him and speak a few words. He reluctantly did so. But when he finally was encouraged to do it, he stepped to the mic and said, "I just want to know who pushed me." So maybe this story wasn't all about courage, but it was about truth. But you see, they threw a big party for him, didn't they? They had a big celebration for him because they thought he had a lot of courage to jump over the side of that ship to save that lady. So we are drawn to courage, to authenticity, to our truth. And your energy will draw you to the energy of other people who have the courage to live their truth. So you don't ever have to worry about being alone or without good friends. Because if the ones that you're with go away because you've told your truth, believe me, other people who have the same ideals about truth will be drawn to your energy. And at the very least, people will respect you. I want to point out one other thing. There are 26 verses in the Bible, in the Old and New Testament, that specifically tell us to be strong and be of good courage when we obey the Lord of our being. Now, what does that mean? To be strong and to be of a good courage when we obey the Lord of our being. That means that God within us, that inner voice, that guidance, that intuition, that never, ever guides us wrong. And that's in the Bible 26 times in some form or another. Must be pretty important to us, huh? I also counted, took me a little while, there are well over 200 references in the Bible, and I did it through the concordance, but still it took a while. Quotes that in Scripture that tells us of the necessity of telling the truth. Over 200 passages in the Bible telling us the necessity of telling our truth. One that stuck out for me said, "Our truth sanctifies, saith the Lord." Our truth sanctifies, saith the Lord. The definition of sanctify is sacred, blessed, and means to purify. So we can't go wrong telling our truth. In fact, your truth is a gift to the universe. We're told, and I believe again Anita said this, realize your magnificence and express yourself fearlessly to the world. We have to realize we're all connected to one another, and what we do that is pure and sacred ripples out and touches others. So we want to always remember, even sometimes when it may feel a bit difficult, we want to remember to be bold, to be courageous, to love your truth and love yourself enough to tell your truth no matter what. Remember, your truth is sacred. And it won't be scary to tell your truth if you learn how to tell your truth with love. We don't just barf our truth on people. That's a sacred word, Keith. We tell our truth with love. We don't hit people over the head with our truth. We don't confront. We speak our truth with love. And if you don't know how, it's easy to learn. When we are doing it in love and in our honesty, it will land in a good spot. Henry David Thoreau said, "Most men lead lives of quiet desperation and go to the grave with their songs still in them." So I want to close tonight by encouraging you to sing your song, tell your truth, and know that doing so will find peace for you, health for you, success for you, and you will be a light in the world. Remember, you have everything to gain and nothing to lose. God bless.